Before you go online and buy another set of SCX24 axles, you need to check this out. Today we're going to be working with a few upgrades here on this little C10. We've got a set of Mofo RC aluminum steering links here, and it comes with all the little necessary parts and pieces you're going to need to install it. We've got a set of Mofo RC. These are the heavy knuckles. These are the LS, low slung heavy knuckles. They are made of brass, coated in a beautiful black coating. And lastly, we have a set of the Mofo RC universal joint high steering angle axle shafts. Rather than spend all your money on a set of complete axles, this is a very, very good option to get the amount of steering you're going to want, the durability you're going to want, the weight up front you're going to want, and just overall better performance out of it all. Now, another thing I would highly recommend for this is going to be an upgraded servo. In this one, we are running a Torx MLS 1022. It's an okay servo. It's not a huge upgrade, but it is an upgrade from the stock servo. We will actually do a review on that at some point. But for now, what we're going to be doing today, we're going to actually take off the stock steering knuckles, the stock steering link, knuckles right there, and the axle shafts that go inside your front axle housing here. We're going to replace them with these three parts and see what kind of steering angle we get afterwards once we're finished here. I think the results are going to be quite surprising. You always can go somewhere, you know, Amazon or even my website, buy a set of aftermarket axles complete, the housing, the knuckles, the shafts that are inside it, everything will be upgraded. And if you're going to do that, I would highly recommend the Mofo RC X15 axles. You get a really great steering angle out of that. Plus, you also get a much heavier duty axle, heavy dutier axle. There we go. A much heavy dutier axle. Versus the SCX24 and what we get stock in the SCX24, which are little dog bones. These are the universals. These give you a lot more steering angle without most of the binding that you get whenever you try to really crank the steering on your SCX24. These ones are made by Mofo RC. These are made of hardened steel. Not really much else to say about them. What I like to do when I install these, we'll go ahead and show you and work through it. But first, I'm going to go ahead and take the body off of this so we can get started. And I always like to just take the body off, set it aside, and one less thing to worry about being in the way while you're doing anything, any sort of upgrades or any sort of tinkering with your little rig. Makes it a whole lot easier, in my opinion. We're just going to remove those two screws, set the body off to the side. Next, I'm going to go ahead and take the wheels off of this thing. And you can see I'm using my handy dandy Mofo RC toolkit right now. This one is a 4mm box hex wrench or hex nut tool or whatever you want to call it. I'm just going to go ahead and take the hex off while I'm here and the hex pin. Set those over here to the side. And then move on to the other side. And one other thing I'll probably be doing to this rig as well that will also increase the steering angle. We're not going to be doing it today though, but I do have a set of overdrive gears and a set of hardened steel gears for the rear axle and overdrive for the front. This is my personal little test rig slash comp rig that I use for like a class 1, you would call it. So we're going to be doing those upgrades as well. I've also got a motor sitting here. We're going to stick a Torque Beast 50 3.0 in it pretty soon. But one thing at a time. And today we are doing axle shafts and steering knuckles. Now if you watched the last video we put out, I had already replaced the steering knuckles on this. And that was just to get a baseline. So we wanted to see what kind of angle you get out of your stock ones before you change over to your aftermarket style, different style like these ones we have here. And then we're going to try out after changing those, going to the axle shafts, steering link, and steering knuckles. And see just how much improvement we can get out of it. I think we got around, let's see, we changed these out, and I think we had around 8 or 9 degrees difference from stock. I think stock was right around 26, 27, and we were done. I think we were right around 35, 34, 35 degrees of angle. So what I've done now is I've taken off both the knuckles here. You just remove the 4 screws, 2 on each side, holding them on. Then I'm going to go ahead and take off this steering link on here, if I can figure out how the easiest way to get to that is. I think if I maybe pop this little shock off like that, then maybe I can just turn this by hand, turn my servo horn just enough that I might be able to get to this little screw here. There we go. And that will allow me to just remove the whole steering link all at once, so I'm not messing with taking off one part or another part that, you know, might unnecessarily have to be taken off. If I can get this to come out all the way. I think I can. Let's see. There we go. Alright, so pretty much all of this stuff we're not going to be needing right now. You know, normally you could disassemble this, kind of pull some parts out if you need to save for later, like the bearings, things like that. You may need to use the bearings depending on which knuckles you could be installing, but with the Mofo RC low slung brass heavyweight knuckles, we do not, because it does include bearings with it. So now you can look down in here and you can see right here, here's your little dog bone stock axle shaft here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull one of these out. I'm not going to pull both of them out yet. I'm just going to take one out. And I'm going to call this a kind of important step as well. I'm going to take this bearing that just came out with this dog bone you saw me pull out here. I'm going to take that bearing. I'm just going to leave it on there. I'm just going to set that whole thing to the side. Now, my new axle shaft, I'm going to stick in here without the bearing. So I am not going to reinstall that bearing that I just pulled out of there. And this helps for a few things. See, you see how this can wiggle back and forth a little bit here? This is actually going to allow us to get a little bit more steering angle out of this by giving that little bit of movement in there. So just that little bit of extra movement right there is going to give us a little bit more angle without the shaft binding. Now, you know, take that with a grain of salt. You may like having a bearing there, but on this small of a scale and this size, it really doesn't matter. I like to pull that out because you do get better steering when you remove that bearing. So what I am going to do now, I am going to install one bearing here. And where'd my little brass drift go? There it is. So just like I showed you before in the last video we had, maybe I'll link that in here somewhere. I'm just going to tap that in a little bit, just like so. And flip it over. Put the rear bearing in. And I'm using something that is approximately the same size as the bearing or a little bit larger than the bearing. And just try to tap it in as straight as possible. And you'll hear it once it goes in all the way, just kind of a thud if you are hammering on it like I am. Now you can obviously put these in other ways, such as not using a hammer, but it's a little more difficult sometimes. And sometimes they just fall right in. You don't want them to be too loose. And you don't want them to be too tight either, but here we go. And that one's in. Now we're going to do the last one with the last bearing that I have. There it is. And that one just fell right in place, almost. Okay, we have our bearings in there. Now what you can do is find the proper orientation here. This one is going to go on the driver's side or the left side. You can see the little part with the threaded hole is going to be facing forwards for your steering link. So we're just going to slide that shaft right through the bearings into there. I'm just going to pull this out and do that. There we go. And then I can slide that right back on in. And there is a small tang the axle slides into on the inside. Is what you'd call your locker on this. And so you do have to make sure that is lined up when you put this together. And I'm going to take one of my screws, slide the little brass bushing over the screw, and go ahead and install this knuckle. I'm going to put the screw in the bottom one first here, I suppose. Hopefully you guys can see what I'm doing a little better than yesterday. I think I came to the conclusion, or if you're watching this at a different time and period, what I did in my last video, I think I came to the conclusion that this background here was kind of hindering me. So what I did is I went ahead and just put a big blue sheet of kind of like some construction paper down, and I think that's going to hopefully allow the video to show up a little better what I'm working on down here. I think everything being on a white background was making it too much reflections into the camera, probably, and making it a little harder to see. And you just want to make sure these are kind of slightly snug, both these screws. If you're going into an aluminum housing or a brass housing, you do want to use a little bit of thread locker. In our case, we're not. We're using the stock plastic housing, so we won't need any thread locker on this. And I'm just going to take my other side. I'm going to slide the axle shaft through the knuckle here, just like we did on the other side. And then I'm going to slide that right into... Oh, wait, I got to pull out the other shaft first. Pull out my other axle shaft and bearing, and slide this right on in there. And you may have to kind of rotate it a little bit to get the shaft to line up to the inside locker. We're going to take one of our screws. These are a M1.4 by 5mm screw. Take one of these and our little brass bushing. And we're going to go ahead and stick it right in that little hole there. Just lightly finger snug those. Again, you don't want to go too tight on anything. Whether it's plastic, aluminum, brass, steel, whatever you're going into, you really don't want to crank down anything on these little small scale rigs. A lot of that is just screw quality, metal quality. These things are just, the screws are so small. I mean, 1.4 millimeters or even less than that in actual diameter. And you start cranking on them, they snap off, and then you have a really bad time. So now we've got that on, and let's see, next I suppose we're going to go ahead and put together the steering link. And here's all the little bits and parts for that, rolling away on my wonky little table here. I probably should have put them in this little tray that I've got, so it all didn't roll away. That would have been the smarter thing to do. Okay. So we're going to take the first link here, and really doesn't matter how you do this. I like to just put the ball in there, put my finger on the back side, take one of your tiny little O-rings, stick it on there, and then just smash like that. And you can flip it around the other side, take your little O-ring, stick it on there, and just smash and kind of roll your thumb as you're doing that. You should be able to get it in there pretty easily. There's probably other techniques and ways to do that, but this is the way that I found that works for me the best. Maybe it'll work for you. If you've got a different, better way of doing it, or a different way you like to do it, you can go ahead and put that in the comments and I'll check it out. So now we're going to take the main longer link here, and we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to grab a little O-ring, stick it on there, flip it upside down or right side up, put on the other O-ring, take the last and final ball here, And do the same thing. These O-rings can be quite a little pain. There's actually a tool made for that, but I don't know. Once you do it a few times, it's not that bad anymore. Next, we're going to take one of these screws here, and these are all the same length. So it doesn't matter which one you grab. I'm just going to stick it through that link end there. I'm going to go ahead and screw it right into this link here. Now, for this kind of thing, use your own discretion on whether or not you want to use Loctite here. It is metal, and it's always good to put Loctite in metal parts when they go into each other. I'm not going to do it though because I don't know, I'll probably be taking this thing apart again tomorrow. So I'd rather not have to unLoctite this part tomorrow again. So that being said, we're going to go ahead and just stick this on here. And I'm going to actually install this upper link here first before I install the one to the other parts to the knuckles. I'm going to go ahead and put this into the horn, because I think that's going to be a little easier to do right now when this is not attached. And same thing here, you could put a little Loctite on it. The other thing you could do right here, once this screw pokes through the other end like it is right now, you could take a little tiny nut that we sell, and you can find them other places as well. A little M1.4 nut, and you can put a little nut on the other end of this and just snug that down with a little teeny tiny pair of pliers or something. And that would kind of double lock that in so you don't have to use Loctite. That would work as well. Same thing here going on to the knuckles. I can actually straighten this out a little bit now. Try not to do that too often. You don't want to crank that servo horn manually all the time, but sometimes it's just easier. I'm going to go ahead and install these screws through the steering link into my steering knuckle. And right here you would want to use a little bit of Loctite as well, going into metal parts like we are right now. I'm not going to though. I'm just going to lightly snug that in there. And final screw on this side. Just the same way we did it on the other side. Just stick that in there and turn. Once we get that installed, I'm going to go ahead and put the shock back on. And now we can go ahead and put the wheels back on, and we can check to see just if and how much steering angle we have gained by doing this. I'm going to pick up this little mess I have here first though. And we do give you some spare parts with most everything we sell. You get some spare parts and extra parts. I find it easier that way, rather than, you know, if there was one missing, or if you dropped one O-ring or one screw and all of a sudden you don't have enough and you're messaging us or calling us, you can't put your rig back together because you're missing a screw. We find it at Mofo RC easier just to go ahead and add like an extra O-ring or an extra screw anytime we get a chance. So with that in, these on, now we can go ahead and put our hex pins in, and hex, wheel hex on. So I can get that in there. These can be a little bit of a bugger to get in sometimes too. Here we go. And put the hex back on and flip to the other side. There we go. Just stick that in there and put the last hex back on. And now we can install the wheels. And these are a set of Trio wheels, or T-reel, or trail. I'm not sure exactly how you're supposed to say that. I don't know if anybody out there knows how that's supposed to be pronounced, and they can enunciate it in the comments. Go ahead and give that a try. So we're going to go ahead and tighten this nut down, and oops, I've over tightened it. So we're going to want to back that off just a little bit until the wheel can freely move like that. Anytime you're doing anything with your front wheels, especially on an SCX24, especially the front ones, but also the rear ones as well, anytime you have to put this wheel nut back on, if you do overly snug the wheel nut and your wheel does not turn like this, if you can flick your wheel and it does not move, you have over tightened it. So just back that off until it does move like that. And you can see all 4 of my wheels are like that. The back is a little harder to over tighten. You can, like, this is really cranked on there and it still does just fine. Now the front ones especially though, there is other ways around that and different things you can put on there, buy or cut or manufacture or ream or whatever to make it not do that. But it's easy enough just to back it off a quarter turn and not have to worry about it. And if you find your little wheel nuts are falling off all the time, just go ahead and get yourself a bottle of thread locker and just put a little dab of thread locker on there right before you put your nut down on there, and you'll be fine. So we know from the previous video I did, which I'll link in the description, exactly what our steering angles were yesterday. And I forgot to write them down and have them here with me handy, but I'm going to say, I believe it was 27 for the stock steering, and I want to say about 34, 35, maybe we'll say 34, just go on the safe side here. I'm going to say it was 34 after replacing just the knuckles. Now let's see what, if any, benefits we've got after replacing the internal axle shafts, these little dog bone stubby things here, stub shafts, with a set of Mofo RC universal joint axle shafts. And let's see what kind of benefit we got here. It looks a little better, doesn't it? So what we're going to do, make sure that's turned up. I just messed with the wrong button. Here we go. Okay, make sure the steering trim is up all the way. And we are going to go ahead and crank this all the way. We'll do the left just for the sake of congruency here. Turn this off. And see what we have now. Okay, now we are at right there. We have now 38 degrees of steering angle now. That is a pretty good, easy way to get some pretty decent turning out of your little rig without having to do too much or spend too much. And you're going to get a nice smooth axle shaft as well. So even with the extra steering wheel we have, you can see it is not bouncing all over the place as we turn fully. Now there is ways to get even more steering out of these as well. Some of the things you could do, first off, right off the bat, would be, I think this servo horn is shorter than most normal servo horns, and I think this servo might be, maybe not. The servo may be a little taller than a normal servo would sit, and the horn being a little shorter than it normally would be also contributes to a little bit less steering angle than we would normally have on here. I'm thinking if we were to put one of our own servos on here, the Mofo RC servo. Okay, we've got that all installed. Let's go ahead and see what kind of steering angle we can get now. Go ahead and turn that off. And let's find out. Okay, now we are at 41 degrees of angle now out of that. I'd say that's a success. So a good easy way to get a decent amount of steering. I don't know if I could recommend it with some servos, but with most of your aftermarket servos that have a normal full-length horn on them, and or don't sit too high or whatever. I don't know, I'm not sure what the deal is with that. I'll have to make some measurements on it and find out. But with most of your normal aftermarket servos, plus the use of a solid steering link, some good knuckles such as these Mofo RC low blow heavy knuckles, and the use of the Mofo RC universal joint axle shafts, you can get a really great steering angle without having to replace the whole axle, which in turn means you get to use all the stock stuff still. You get to have a stock plastic housing. You don't have to spend a bunch of extra money on any other upgrades. And the thing you're going to get a lot of the times when you use like a real popular one is like the Mias or Mies or Moos or Muse or whatever, however you pronounce that. You're going to get a lot of scrub steer with that. When you take your turn here, instead of it just turning like that, this whole outer part would kind of come up and around and forward while it turns, or back and in as it turns. That's what people are referring to when they talk about scrub steer. And I mean, it's not really terrible, but it's unpredictable, and it makes things a little bit harder to navigate. And you have the whole force of your wheels swinging around as you're doing stuff, right? Which can get in the way. It can rub on the bodies more obviously, things like that. So, good easy way to upgrade these, get some great steering. You're going to go to moforc.com, pick up a set of our universal joint axle shafts. They're incredibly strong as well. That being said, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please do hit the like button, the subscribe button, things like that help the algorithm to YouTube to make us more noticeable, to get more likes and views and subscribes and all that stuff that's going to send more traffic to our website to help build our great tiny little American company here. Really appreciate it. Thank you all and have a great day.